Welcome back to CTV Morning Live. Steve Brown joining us, the president of the Family Physiotherapy Clinics. Okay, it's really interesting. We've had quite the discussion going on about the topic today, because it's interesting for you because you're constantly going to conferences, learning a little bit more about techniques, about injuries, about surgeries, and this was a really interesting one you just got back from Florida.
Yeah, I was down in Orlando, and I was at the first annual orthopedic conference there for the American Physiotherapy Association, which I was quite interested in to see what they were doing down there in the States. And one of the topics, there was a lot of good information, but one of them that kind of piqued my curiosity was ACL repair. Now, we have hundreds of thousands of ACL injuries, anterior cruciate ligaments, for those who don't know.
For those who don't know, and we're usually it's around the knee area.
On the knee. It's a deceleration. The actual ligament is in the middle of the knee, and it holds your lower limb on top of the other one, so it doesn't slide forward. The lower limb won't slide forward in terms of with that. There's more in terms of into it than that.
Right, but it's that injury, and we often hear it, and you'll hear it in news that so-and-so got injured, but football, soccer, skiers.
And basketball players. Yeah, there's lots of top athletes that have an ACL injury and what have you. So we were discussing that, and really the discussion was centered around, are we counseling our young athletes enough in terms of the risks associated with having an ACL tear and a complete rupture of the ligament? And that was the discussion that we were just having. And the research shows that people think that the surgery is a cure, that they're going to return back to their performance level, which they were at beforehand. And unfortunately, research doesn't show that. And they had a cohort study where the soccer players that they looked at, 72% of them actually returned back to the sport. Football in high school and college down in the States, it was around 60% of them actually returned back to where they were, or returned back to the sport. 43% of those 60% said that they actually returned back to the performance level of where they were before, where 30% didn't even return back to the sport. At all. And then the incidence of re-injury for the young athlete is very high. Within 2 years, you're looking at a quarter of the athletes returning back after an ACL repair in terms of surgery, or going to re-rupture their ACL tendon. So the physiotherapists down there, the heads down there in the orthopedic division were saying, not that, it's one of those things where you have to look at each individual person and say, should you really go back and play, or should you maybe change a different sport, or not go in terms of so strenuous and with that. And I know it's in terms of, it's not the best news to hear, but it's one of those things that we just want to counsel people accordingly. And they used an example. They were getting a top Italian soccer player who was 37 years of age, who had an ACL repair. It was his third one, and he had a good chance of playing in the World Cup. And so, of course, they repaired him, they rehabbed him, and he played. Italy didn't do that well, I guess, in the World Cup, whatever the case may be, but he was at the end of his career, as opposed to an 18 or 19-year-old high school football player down in the States, or even here in Canada, who's not going to make it to college football, who's not going to make a living out of playing football. Do you really want that person going back into the game? Because of the fact the research showed that 45 to 70% of these people got osteoarthritis in their knees within 15 years, and it was even higher if they returned back to the sport. So it was just a matter of getting the word out. Should we counsel the young athlete more in terms of making that decision, whether they should play, not play, or play at a different level?
You were saying too that there was a topic that the NCAA was looking at, not allowing players, or being very cautious about allowing players to play within their system who had already undergone the surgery.
That's right, because of the high incidence level. Now, we're talking like, they were using examples of kids 19 years old who have had like 3 and 4 surgeries and going, I need my next surgery to get back in there and play and stuff. And it's kind of like, really? Do you really need to get back in there?
What if you have one kid who is a star soccer player and is heading off on a scholarship? Granted, he may not play professional, but you have the opportunity to get him to at least play 4 years of university and have his education paid for. Are you going to be going on an individual basis? On understanding, is the athlete prepared to understand that they may not be playing at that level, or that they may not be playing at the professional level now, but they can get to this. I mean, it's got to be very individualized.
It is definitely, and it's just about that counseling in terms of with that individual. You're just weighing the risks. Usually you do that with everyone for the most part, the risk rewards. And what I was always taught when I was down there on scholarship down there in the States, mind you, it was golf, so it wasn't too injury prone.
Right.
To a certain extent, we do wear out our backs and our knees. But it was the top 10% in the high school level will make it to the collegiate ranks, and then the top 1% in college will make it a living in terms of playing professional.
Right.
So if you're not in the top 1%, study hard because...
Right, but that's why the NCAA is so good on promoting the fact that they graduate individuals who will go on to lead professional great lives, knowing that only the 1.01% actually make it pros.
Yeah.
But it's the education in there too.
Yes,
I know
it's very
we're going to get into that argument, but something to really consider when you are talking about an ACL injury and just to know the factors that going in. Especially great information.
Yeah,
Thanks.
super.
Always a pleasure with Steve Brown from the Family Physiotherapy Centers.